Starting. Welcome everybody. So this is our latest Safeguarding in Schools webinar. I'm Emma Geiringer. I'm the Safeguarding in Schools lead. Today we are joined by CAMHS colleagues to hear about neurodivergent children and young people and how we can understand and safeguard accordingly. There will be lots of information shared today and opportunities for engagement. There'll be time for questions at the end, but you're also welcome to type any questions in the chat as we go. So I'll hand over now to our CAMHS colleagues. We have Iris, Alyssa and Lashe. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Emma. Hello, everyone. My name is Iris Varela. I'm a clinical specialist in the senior wellbeing practitioner. I'm a supervisor, clinical supervisor. And I'm so glad to be here today because I know there are quite a lot of, we get a lot of concerns sort of around neurodivergent young people in schools, and sometimes there is quite a lot of disagreements in what to do and working with families, and it feels a little bit stuck. So thank you everyone for being here today. So we have Lashe and Alyssa.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Lashe and I'm a trainee child wellbeing practitioner here at Southwark.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Lee and I'm also a trainee children's wellbeing practitioner here. So glad to meet you all today.
Okay, I think we'll get started. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a little bit about us. We are a team of children wellbeing practitioners that work part of the CAMHS team. We work with children and young people up to the ages of 17, and we also work with parents alongside that. We offer guided self-help approaches based on cognitive behavioural therapy to work with children and young people who are often experiencing mild to moderate difficulties like anxiety, low mood, but also behaviours of concern. Thank you. Just to kind of cover some ground rules for today and just how things are going to go, we pride on confidentiality, so we understand that things that will be shared here, if we can kind of keep it here, and also we ask that, like, if you do open up or decide to share, if we can avoid using details of pupils or students that you have worked with. We also understand that some of the topics we'll be talking about may be triggering or sensitive, and we understand that it's important that you look after yourself, and if you need a moment, please do take a moment. And also in regards to break, we will have a 1-minute break every 30 minutes, so feel free to the toilet, get a drink. And then we also encourage, well, it's lovely to see a lot of that one. And also in terms of conversations or speaking, if you can, feel free to speak if you choose, but if you also want to use the text box, you can type it in there as well if you feel comfortable too. So thank you. Okay, so just a little check-in. We have a Menti questionnaire. If possible, if you guys can all access it, I'm not sure if you have phones or what's the best way for you guys to access it. If you can scan it, this is essentially just like a short, brief question just about how you currently feel in terms of supporting, how confident you feel in supporting neurodivergent people in your schools, and then we'll kind of come back to it at the end to see just if there's been some changes, if you feel like you've kind of learned some tips and tricks and strategies. So if possible, if you guys can scan it now, and then we can move on. If you have any difficulty scanning it as well, you can let us know. Be happy to help.
Should we give 1 minute for everyone to fill that in? Yeah, because might be a bit of the work. Yeah, feel free to let us know once you have filled in the form, and you can put it on the chat box or something.
Okay, I can see we've got some results coming in, so that's good. Thank
Great,
you, everyone.
amazing.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. I think we're good to go.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today. We know that it's like middle of the day. You guys probably have a lot of duties, a lot of things to do in the school day. So thank you so much for coming. So today this workshop is about safeguarding neurodivergent children and young people. And to get kickstart the whole webinar, I would like to talk a bit more about the outcomes and also impacts for the importance of safeguarding. As we can see on this graph, we can see that actually there's increased rate of mental health difficulties for neurodivergent adolescent across a really long period, which can create long-term risk for mental health illness across lifespan. And another thing is that around 50% of autistic adults can also experience mental health difficulties, which 30% of them with ADHD also experience depression and anxiety. And lastly, autistic young children and young people can have up to 28 more times more likely to think about attempting suicide or actually implementing their suicidal behaviors than non-autistic peers, so that we can see that mental health impact of not treating neurodivergence people right might be really concerning and may have a really big impact on them. So other than that, we can see that there are a lot of school distress within neurodivergent children and young people, and this has seen to be increased throughout the whole COVID pandemic. And at the same time, around 83% of the students who experience school distress are also autistic, and 52% of the pupils also identify as having a negative impact of mental health. So all of these kind of outcomes and impact measures can clearly tell us that how important safeguarding children and young people with neurodivergence needs are really important. So although we try to put in different strategies and also action plans in daily life, they often still get there are often still a lot of misalignment and also a lot of difficulties in what we expect might work and what actually will happen. And it might be good to have a think about what the reason could be. So maybe I'll give 10 seconds for everyone to have a think about it. So yeah, as you can tell from the screen, actually autistic people experience and also express emotions, communicate, interact, and also sense the world around us very differently to non-autistic people. So it could be really difficult for non-autistic people to actually recognize the different emotions and being empathetic to them. But at the same time, a lot of ways where we do things in today's society are actually the neurotypical way of doing things, just like communicating or experiencing the world. These things are often seen as correct, but the autistic presentation of things are seen wrong. For example, if you are making eye contact, that's a good thing. If you're not making eye contact, that's a strange thing. So there are a lot of different examples where we perceive the neurotypical way as always the model answer, always the perfect thing that we want to see. But at the same time, autistic presentation is often misunderstood and misconsidered a lot of times. And for most of the occasions, we will reinforce behaviors based on the rewards and also punishment. For example, we will get rewarded if we're not showing signs of being autistic, like eating all kinds of food rather than certain kind of food, having good eye contact rather than looking down on your hands, sitting still rather than playing around and fidgeting around. So there are a lot of different things that we think it's correct, but it's actually what neurotypical people will actually do rather than what autistic or neurodivergent people will do. However, but there's no point that non-autistic people are expected to understand autistic perspective or culture. And at the same time, it also is the same that autistic people doesn't really have the need to understand what non-autistic people do. But in reality, autistic people often need to do all the work to be accepted by non-autistic people. For example, they are forced to sit still in class, they're forced to do certain things, they're forced to follow certain routines, but although these kind of things might not be suitable for them. So often a lot of accommodation has to be thoughtful and often prescribed incorrectly. So that's why we can see something called empathy gap, where non-autistic people cannot really empathize with autistic people, and at the same time autistic people are really difficult to understand non-autistic people's world as well. So it's like both sides, not understanding both sides, but at the same time autistic people have to comply with the non-autistic perspective, if that makes sense. And now we have a trend that we are trying to switch things from a medical model to a social model. Historically, we often follow a medical model where we use deficit-based language, such as considering autistic people as having disorder, they're having something wrong with them, and we do have to look for a cure, like giving them medication, using different kind of behavior modification to help them to be like what we do. But at the same time, right now we have a change in what we feel neurodivergent is, and now we are considering more about differences and strength-based languages, which means that we're considering autistic people as neurodivergent, as someone who is different as us, but rather than having a disorder. And we will use neuroaffirmative goals such as giving them adequate support and also adaptation and accommodation, rather than putting them into a fixed framework and hoping them to do certain kind of behaviors that we wish we can see. So this is the medical model and also the social model, and we are now focusing more on the social model, if that makes sense. And at the same time, we also want to let you guys know that language actually matters. Professionals, a lot of medical health professionals or mental health professional tends to use with autism. So like students with autism or students with ADHD, because they think that the person first language is more appropriate, and it's just what they often learn about in training. But actually the autistic community advocates for the use of identity first language, which means that we will use autistic people, autistic children and young people, rather than the other way around, because an autistic brain cannot actually separate from an autistic person, and this really defines the way they perceive the world, and they don't often see themselves as being disordered, and they're really proud of their neurology as well. So we now have a process model of social stigma and also its consequence. It looks pretty complicated, but the main point of this graph is to want to show you guys that stigma, stereotypes, prejudice, and also discrimination, together all of these things with stigma-related stressors, these things might actually lead to negative outcomes in autistic people in terms of the medical health aspect, physical health aspect, performance, and also relationship-wise. At the same time, it does have some kind of positive outcomes, like the one down there over here. Not sure if anyone can see my arrow, but most of the time, the negative outcomes are more prevalent and more severe. So that we actually want to let you guys know that how important it is for us to address everything on this side. So basically the stigma, the stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. And we think about how can we manage these kind of aspects in order to avoid the negative outcomes. And other than that, I would also like you all to know that there is stigma in minority, neurodivergent children and young people as well. As you can see from the PowerPoint slide, Black children are 5 times more likely to receive an incorrect diagnosis for adjustment disorder and conduct disorder as compared to white children. And this is partially is because of the traditional approaches where we engage children and families in therapy actually are not really culturally appropriate and not really considerate of their differences in experience. And this eventually will lead to a lot of distrust in services and also disengagement. And at the same time, girls and women also tend to receive misdiagnosis for borderline personality disorder and also bipolar disorder as well. So I will passing on to Lachey.
Following on from what Alyssa just mentioned, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that Black children are already punished more harshly compared to their white counterparts, regardless of whether they are neurodivergent or not. And this is often seen in a larger way in classrooms when there are like Black and neurodivergent. So I think it's really important that we kind of explore co-occurring presentations like dyslexia, dyspraxia, and minorities, and I think it's really important that we consider that. Next. Okay, so we're going to go in and talk a lot about like sensory differences in neurodivergent people. So we have a video here to share with you, and it's essentially just speaking about how neurodivergent people like process the sensory environment differently, and how they may be hypersensitive or hyposensitive to things like light, sound, touch, as movement, or just internal sensations. So I'm going to let the video play.
All humans have similar sensory systems.
Are you guys able to hear the sound? Great,
yeah.
Thank you. Sorry guys, a bit of technical difficulty. Let me... There we go.
All humans have similar sensory systems, processing sensory information across the same 8 domains, all working together. Sight, your visual sense, processed through your eyes. Gustatory, taste, sensed through your tongue and mouth. Tactile, touch, sensed through your skin. Auditory, sense of hearing, noise and sound, processed through your ears. Olfactory, sense of smell, processed through your nose. Vestibular, balance, perceived through your inner ear, telling you where your head is in space and keeping you upright. Interoception, an internal sense which tells you things like if you're hungry, how fast your heart is beating, if you're in pain or if you have to go to the toilet. Proprioception, sense of movement. Proprioception tells you where your body, arms and legs are in space. Autistic people tend to experience more extremes in sensory processing across the 8 sensory domains than non-autistic people do, being both under and over responsive to different information at different times. In reality, this might mean an autistic student may experience pain that a non-autistic person might not understand as a genuine reason to feel pain, or an autistic person may struggle to recognize pain or have a delayed response to pain. They might hear things or smell things that non-autistic people can't hear or smell, such as perfume, hairspray, laundry detergent, or coffee breath, and become overwhelmed by those things. Autistic people may be able to taste specific ingredients, or those ingredients may taste different to how others experience them. They might experience touch in a way that causes pain or fear or intense pleasure. An autistic person's sense of balance might be affected, so the world might go off kilter, or they may be able to do gymnastic exercises easily and seek out opportunities to move, spin, climb or tumble. They might not recognise that they are hungry or thirsty, or need to go to the toilet, or when they're tired. An autistic person might be less or more conscious of their surroundings and more easily startled and surprised by the nearness of things, or fail to judge where things are. They may experience eye contact as painful or overwhelming, or conversely may make overwhelming eye contact and be accused of staring. Autistic people often experience overwhelming sensory dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation can exacerbate that, and vice versa. This connection between emotional and sensorial dysregulation helps us to understand why, when autistic people are overwhelmed in some way, they can be triggered into meltdowns or shutdowns. Autistic people also frequently experience alexithymia, which is a disconnect between your brain and emotions. This can be intensified by developmental trauma from others invalidating or dismissing your emotional responses. Alexithymia can make understanding your own emotional state extremely difficult. Autistic people experience the sensory world very differently to non-autistic people, in a world dominated by normative perspectives around sensory processing. That normative perspective makes it simple for non-autistic people to unwittingly dismiss or not recognise the impact of how an autistic person is experiencing their surroundings. This can lead to non-autistic people making uninformed and incorrect assumptions about autistic behaviours, responses and needs. What an adult should do to support an autistic student's sensory comfort once their individual needs have been identified is communicate details of sensory environments in advance and adapt the environment by reducing sensory input from things like lighting, smells, sounds and visual landscapes. Mitigate negative sensory input by investigating sensory support tools with the individual. Encourage and normalise stimming. Create quiet spaces to withdraw to as required. Offer the child control over unscheduled movement breaks. An autistic student can be supported to regulate through techniques such as body mapping and body scanning. These techniques support individuals to support them to understand what their body is doing in response to the environments they are in and the experiences that they are having. Helping them identify what their body is telling them and connecting that bodily experience to their emotional experience. This can then help them to predict what environments are safe for them or not. Techniques such as lazy 8 breathing can help support the student to focus on their breathing and remain calm when they are experiencing overwhelm. Fundamentally, however, the onus should be on responsible adults to facilitate ways of adapting the environment for autistic pupils through collaboration and consultation with them. Autistic people should not be required to endure or survive harmful environments when they are not given the agency to manage their own spaces. They cannot simply become more resilient if their surroundings are incessantly overwhelming. If you are dysregulated or in a high state of sensory or emotional arousal, would you be able to learn? If adaptations aren't possible, then consider how the student may feel in that space, how safe they are, and how it may impact them negatively. Whether you may be able to even recognise this and what you might interpret from what you see or don't see. Whether that environment is conducive to their ability to learn.
Amazing. That visual was so insightful, and I feel like it provided a lot of key takeaways on how to support neurodivergent children and young people, and ensuring that the environment is better suited to them. I was just thinking, in terms of like the visual, was there like anything that kind of stood out to anyone, or in terms of some key takeaways? Was there something that I guess you find, I guess, within your schools that you do often, or is there something that you feel like you can pick up from the video? Okay, I think for me, something that was a key takeaway is just adapting the environment to the young person. Let's say if you go to the not to be asked, I've just seen something in the chat box, not to be asked to be resilient. Yeah, I think that's important. I think when you're asking them, it's just, you're essentially trying to make them kind of conform or fit into society, when it should be, a society should be accepting them, as they are. I think I saw something else in the chat box.
They said when the environment is not suitable.
Exactly. And that moves, I guess, perfectly onto what we're discussing now. And I think it's important that we adapt the environment and adapt the things around the young person, so that we can have better outcomes. We have a little formula here, and it's essentially what we're saying is that if you have an autistic person and the environment is harmful to them, so it's not meeting their needs, it's not suitable for them, then they're more likely to have negative outcomes. But however, if we have an autistic young person and we're considering everything about their environment, everything about their needs, what helps them better to succeed in their environment, then that's more likely to have better outcomes. And I think it relates back to the social model, how we're thinking about how we need to make adaptations. The society needs to make adaptations, not them having to conform to society's norm, and how we need to make those changes for the young people. And I think it's essential as like the adults or the people in power, I guess, in schools and education, that we make the changes suitable for autistic children and young people, rather than expecting them to tolerate overwhelming environments, or to have to like mask or change themselves to fit in. So I think it's where we have to think about, how do I better suit their needs, talking to them and understanding their sensory preferences and things that better support them to learn and to grow. So our aim is just essentially to adjust the environment to suit them.
Someone said, Natasha said, understanding that one side doesn't fit all.
Exactly. So I think, no, exactly. And I think that's important in terms of like how each neurodivergent child or autistic young person is different, and how it's important to learn about them and what works for them and what helps them, and then work in that way, rather than just kind of considering them or seeing them all as the same, which isn't right. Yeah. Next slide, Alyssa. Okay, so now we're going to got another video about monotropism.
Person is in an environment in which they feel unsafe, sensorially or emotionally,
going through the middle.
Greater monotropic depth can be monotropism. Setting up the science. The theory of monotropism describes the way in which autistic people's neurology processes sensory information, engages with something in order to give it our full focused attention, works to move our attention from one thing to another, and validates autistic experience in a non-pathological way. In order to give anything our attention, we need to build up inertia, allowing our sensory systems time to align themselves with what we're focusing on. What's happening in that time is the monotropic brain is looking for an in, a hook, something to spark its interest. What does it look and feel like? Autistic people experience attention very differently to non-autistic people. Once it has found that hook, the autistic brain is able to lock onto it. But the focus of our attention has more mass than anything else in our environment. It's like a black hole. Its gravity drags us in. We're pulled towards it with immense force, hurtling through a tunnel of attention. We then experience a state of flow, where the object of our attention becomes all-encompassing. Inside that flow state, we can have incredibly intense experiences. It enables us to explore topics at great depths and complete tasks to a high degree of proficiency. It can feel incredibly good to access a flow state around your passions, increasing your levels of enjoyment and satisfaction, and thus increasing the intensity of the flow. If an autistic person is in an environment in which they feel unsafe, sensorially or emotionally, greater monotropic depth can be needed to cut out those negative sensations. Conversely, unsafe places and situations can dysregulate us too much, so that we're unable to build enough inertia to get into a flow state. Why is it important to know this? If you aren't aware of monotropic neurology, it can be easy to assume that while in a flow state, an autistic person is deliberately disengaged, deliberately not listening, or not paying attention on purpose. This is all classified negatively as challenging behaviour, but is not the case. It can be easy to assume that an autistic person should transition between states of attention as quickly as non-autistic people do. But coming out of your attention tunnel and moving your attention from one thing to another can be difficult and take time. You're pulling the weight of your being out of a gravity well, and afterwards you need to realign your sensorial and emotional state and then refocus on the next thing that needs your attention. If an autistic person is pulled out of monotropic flow too quickly, it causes our sensory systems to dysregulate. This in turn triggers us into emotional dysregulation, and we quickly find ourselves in a state ranging from uncomfortable to grumpy to angry, or even triggered into a meltdown or a shutdown. This reaction is also often classed as challenging behaviour, when really it is an expression of distress caused by the behaviour of those around us. How you can get things wrong: not preparing for transitions, too many instructions, speaking too quickly, not allowing processing time, using demanding language, using rewards or punishments instead of intrinsic motivation, poor sensory environments, poor communication environments, making assumptions, and a lack of insightful and informed staff reflection.
So just to brief summary, so monotropism is that deep focus for an autistic person in something of their interest where they're really immersed in it. And I guess in schools it can be very difficult when they're having to be pulled out of that without being aware of this. I think it's something that we have to be mindful of, and we have to try to build that transition and understand that leaving that state can be really overwhelming or distressing for that young person. So just considering how we want them to move on from tasks and just being mindful of this. So whether that is using rewards or being mindful of the transition, or how we're going to kind of ask them or demand of them, ask of them how they can kind of move from this task or this focus into something else you want to do, I guess, in a classroom environment. Next slide, please. Should we have a break?
Oh, sorry. Hey, yes, there we go.
Okay, we'll have a 1 minute break. You guys can stand up, take a walk, go to the toilet, have a sip of your drink. So we'll come back in a minute and then we'll continue on. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. So masking. What is masking? Masking is a developmental response to stigma and trauma, which involves suppressing and projecting aspects of identity in order to maintain safety. This can be to try to fit in or to avoid negative situations. Masking can look like a range of things like trying to copy others' behaviors by forcing eye contact when they don't actually want to maintain eye contact. Also trying to stay quiet or to sit still when they really want to move around, they want to jump, but also pretending to be fine, even if they are not. Even when overwhelmed, that's masking. Masking can be unconscious or conscious. It's something that sometimes, you can do in order to feel safe, to maintain safety, or to be seen as the perfect child. But sometimes it can be unconscious behavior that you've just kind of learned from trauma response and you just kind of do unconsciously. We also have video masking. Should we go into that?
Yes.
You're not sharing anymore, Alisa.
Yeah, sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Sure.
We'll be coming up soon.
Sure. Does it make sense that the term masking? So it's basically that trauma response in regards to what have people perhaps been gone through, children, and it starts from really early on. You really have been told off for moving too much, no paying attention, no looking at people, no playing nicely, no playing, interacting with children. So children internalize that and start really making changes, even though it's really not what really feels the most comfortable with them, or just getting on with the uniform, or just getting on with the shoes and routines that perhaps can be quite painful and difficult, but they are having to suppress that. So is that to avoid negative reactions from others? So it's to be safe, so I'm not told off. I'm not told to get detention from not understanding or not doing the homework on time, or it's just that kind of reaction to feel safe, not feeling criticized by others or getting punished and avoid. So it takes quite a lot of energy and emotional drain for that. So
yeah,
when you're ready.
apologize everyone. I do think that the video is not working right now. So maybe
Okay.
perhaps we can send it to everyone later on.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Sure.
Iris or Lashay, you guys can show it if you guys have the copy as well.
No, that's okay. Let's just
okay.
keep going to the
Thank
next slide.
Yeah,
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you so much for explaining, Iris.
No, no.
Thank you. So, yeah.
So, yeah. BIMS. What is BIMS? So we've spoken a lot about sensory differences, monotropism, and masking, but BIMS, which stands for burnout, inertia, meltdown, and shutdowns, is a framework which helps us to understand the different experiences neurodivergent people and how they respond to stress, overwhelming sensory overload, or masking environments for a long period of time. So we have burnout. Next slide. Thank you. Burnout, which is a distinct source of severe and chronic exhaustion. It often is a result of masking for a long period of time. So burnout can look like a range of different things, and it can look like chronic tiredness, a decrease in skills, and reduced tolerance to stimulation. This can often be misinterpreted just for like lack of motivation or effort, but really it's just the severe, they're just really exhausted, and it's a chronic state of where they feel really, really overwhelmed by having to mask or be in environments that are challenging or difficult for them for a long period of time. So we have some examples of things that some young people have said, just to kind of understand their experience and what burnout looks like or feels like for them. So one is just feeling drained, like I don't have the energy to get up. It feels difficult to snap out of it, and it feels like my blanket is 500 pounds and it's weighing down on me. Next slide.
So essentially, when neurodivergent people talk about burnout, they are often describing something like far more persuasive and also far more life-altering. So essentially, we thought burnout is just I'm just tired, but it essentially to them is so much more than that. It feels really tired and really exhausted, and it feels like the world is actually collapsing. And this is something that we might not be able to understand about them. So it would be good that everyone will have a think about, have you ever met someone with having a burnout? What does it look like? Try to imagine how it actually feels for them. So I would also like to clarify the difference between depression and burnout, because a lot of people often misinterpret them and categorize them into a same thing. So depression essentially is marked by persistent low mood and also a loss of pleasure. But on the opposite side, burnout is more about the depletion of energy, which affect our coping capacity and daily functioning. So not sure if anyone can think about a major difference on how can we actually handle burnout and also depression. So depression essentially when you try to, because you're feeling really low, when you try to motivate, get some motivation by doing different kind of things, you might essentially have an improved in mood. But on the opposite side for burnout, because you don't have any energy anymore, if you keep pushing someone to do something, even though that thing might be something that they like, essentially this will be even the consequences are way more severe and way more detrimental to their mental health and also their well-being. So it is really essential for us to have a think about what depression looks like and what burnout look like, and separate them into twos in order for us to know what to do and how can we best support the children and young people.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. Just to add, yeah, it's something that we usually people get quite confused in regards to depressed. Young people are feeling depressed, but actually when we think about it, they're actually in burnout. So in depression, we usually, people say, well, you need to do more activities in order to kind of get out and feel more motivated and really increase your mood. But actually, if you're in burnout, actually doing more activities will actually make it feel worse, which then that gets internalized to the young person saying, well, I'm trying to do more, I can't do more. So then it's just, there must be something wrong with me. I'm broken. It is my fault. I've been told by people that know better to do this and I can't do it, so there must be something wrong. So it's really being mindful about not confusing the two.
Yeah, thank you so much, Iris. Thanks for the clarification. So another thing that we can see often as a consequence of masking or just acting too much is inertia, which is a prolonged mental state of being stuck. And this results in the physical inability to actually engage in activities that we want to do. For example, even though I want to concentrate on something, I want to move on to lunch, I want to move on to another homework or another task. But because we're really stuck, we're really, really tired, even but then too much of a trouble, we just cannot do it. So this is what inertia feels like. And from the quotes that we have gathered from children and young people, we can see that they mention about having trouble getting started with doing something, getting trouble getting the ball rolling, actually getting to work on something. So we can see that it's actually really difficult for them to do something and have the motivation to do something because they are actually really tired. Then passing on to the sheet. Is that my slide? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And another thing that we might see is meltdown. So other than burnout, we often can see that I think a lot of you guys might already have observed these kind of experience from children and young people where they are having meltdown. And this is often the outward expression of feeling overwhelmed. For example, you might see them scream, they cry, they bite, they fight. But all of these kind of things is because of the lack of control and also accumulated stress. So when they're feeling too much and they don't know how to express it, they will just use external ways of trying to like manage their emotions and try to release their energy. And sometimes you think that those are intentional, but actually they are unintentional. They don't want to do it, but their body just couldn't really control that. And a lot of times it could be unconscious as well. So even though you might think that they did something and then they know they actually did that thing, but to them it could be something really blurry and they often forgot about it after experience it. So it would be good for us to keep in mind that how can we manage this kind of situation when it happens, because sometimes they just don't remember about that. So when you tell them, oh, you had a meltdown just now, they might not really admit that, or it will be difficult for you guys to engage in a conversation with them about it. So just be aware of that would be really useful. And as you guys can see on the right side of the PowerPoint slide as well, there are some other quotes that children and young people gave us, which are, you are a passenger on a ride of destruction. And also, I don't really remember what happens really well. And it's usually a little fuzzy.
We see that quite a lot in regards to meltdowns at home, because usually it's around when people have been masking through school, suppressing all of that neurological needs that have been suppressed and trying to stay safe and not get into trouble. Then they go home, and usually tends to happen when they have meltdowns. Then this is the time where it starts being the differences between school and home, where parents come in and saying, they're having a meltdown, they're destroying everything, they're hitting themselves, they're hitting me. And the school is like, actually, they're the perfect kid at school. So it must be at home. So this also gets very, very then different views. And a lot of the times if you're in school, we don't get to see those meltdowns. And it's because of masking. So it's really kind of understanding and really working with families in knowing what's going on for the young person. Go ahead, Alisa, sorry.
Thank you, Iris. Just like we mentioned, meltdown is more outward, but for shutdown, that's more of a inward expression in response to like stress. So it essentially happens when your brain is overwhelmed by the sensory input, pressures, emotional stress, demands, and it's like the nervous system's way of essentially powering down to protect itself. In some aspects. And I think it's important to notice that shutdowns aren't a choice. It's not something that neurodivergent people actively want to do. It's more of a neurological safety response that they experience, and this can feel like for them maybe going blank, like thoughts disappearing, not knowing what to say, or speech becomes quite difficult, but also feeling like they need to withdraw and just wanting to be in a quiet space. But also this can, it's a feeling of feeling overwhelmed by the environment, and this may like reduce the way a neurodivergent child or young person is able to engage and communicate and respond. And I think it's often missed because often notice expression just outwardly, whereas inwardly is often missed. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on meltdowns in comparison to shutdowns. So I think it's important to kind of notice some of the signs of a shutdown, so that withdrawal, that feeling fatigue and feeling heavy, or feeling really disconnected and not being able to access things that are often normal, like speech or decision making for them. And in schools, this can look really different, like not knowing how to respond to an instruction, or feeling like they need to hide, or just being more non-verbal in those moments. I think we also have some examples of how a shutdown feels like for children and young people, and they've described it as, it feels like they said shutdown is just like usually because of stress. I'll just completely freeze up. I can't really talk. I'll stutter. I'll literally freeze up. I'll sit down or something. I'll make weird noises, but that's basically just the sound of my mind straining to work. And I think shutdown is, is a result of overwhelming situations of masking for a period of time. These are how they find it safer, or it's easier to respond to stress over a long period of time. I think it's really important to notice.
Yeah, I will add again here is that the shutdowns is one of the ones that is the most concerning to me, because usually you don't see it. You don't see it behaviorally. In observation, you don't see it. However, here is when a lot of young people experience suicidal ideations, suicidal attempts, self-harming, but no one knows. So it's just thinking, it's something to be really, really aware of this experience and validating them. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Iris. So if we're thinking about some ideas based on things that I guess we've discussed, what are some things or ways you have experienced noticing, or if you kind of learned throughout today, how you would kind of notice if a neurodivergent young person is distressed? We can put it in the chat, we can feel free to share, or like how would you best kind of know how to respond in those moments? Don't have much time.
Or if you have ever kind of experienced it.
Yeah.
From a student. Or just something to think about.
Yeah. Okay.
Can be acting out, can be internalized, very individual to the child. Absolutely, 100%. So really being curious about how that might be. Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. Okay, so now the spell framework is essentially a helpful guide for us to support neurodivergent children and young people by creating environments that are structured, that are predictable and positive, that provide empathy, low arousal, but also they experience links. This makes a big difference in supporting neurodivergent people and how they can feel, they learn, and how they connect with others. I'm going to try and go for it briefly, but also covering it because I know a lot of us, some people may have to leave, but also just to know it is recorded, so you guys can come back to this again when you have time. So in terms of structure, it's important. Structure helps children and young people to feel safe, to feel secure, and more in control. So whether that is providing clear routines, if that's what best suits the needs of the young person, and breaking tasks into smaller, manageable steps. This can help to reduce feeling overwhelmed. Let's say in class and it's like, okay, let's get out your books. I don't know, rather than get out your books, we could break it down into smaller steps that may feel easier for a young person to manage in those moments. Also, if we move on to predictability, and positivity. So it's important to build trust. This helps to reduce anxiety for children and young people who find change really difficult. So similar to that structure, keeping that same routine, just so where change is hard, they're able to know what comes next, and they find security in knowing that, okay, this is what we're doing next, so they know what to expect. And this just helps a child to feel more calm and more in control. Often I find that children and young people often don't have a sense of control, so if they can find that in a routine or in predictability, that is really important for them, to give them that sense of control. So this could be whether that's visual schedules, countdowns for transitions, or giving heads ups before plans change.
Yeah, someone said on the chat, listen provides space and psychological safety, which is absolutely great. And Jonathan said, ensuring opportunities for sensory regulation through the day, movement breaks, and other sensory activities. Again, needs to be very individualized to the child. Absolutely, very good. Just being curious, constantly curious.
I think I guess it leads on to positivity and their strengths in general. So encouraging time for them to focus on their passions, allowing them to enjoy the things that they enjoy, and creating space for that. And whether that is trying to use that in their learning environments and in resources that we use to support the child. Still in the SPELL framework, empathy. So it's really important to view the world through that young person's lens, understanding their experiences, what it looks like for them, what it feels like for them, and just really empathizing with them, validating, being curious about their experiences, and having these open conversations. I think that's really important to support neurodivergent people. Moving on to low arousal. This is just essentially about creating a space, environment that is suited for them. So whether that is being considerate of their sensory needs, whether you're aware they may not like loud noises, so ensuring that that's something that's kind of not around in their environment. So it's an environment that's perfectly created and adapted for them to to thrive. And so I think it goes back to how we mentioned about individualizing. Each child is different, and just being mindful of this when we're creating spaces around them. And links is important. Connections that make a really, really big difference. So linking children and young people with other neurodivergent children and young people to find that familiarity, that safe space, so they can feel understood, so they can share experiences, and to feel less alone. I think links is really, really important.
Sure. And like that empathy and really understanding monotropism is something that it's a new term that not many people think about or talk about. Monotropism is part of that neurology, that getting really deep into subjects and how difficult it can be to pull them out. If we think about how many transition children do in a day at school, it's quite a lot. So you transition from someone talking to then doing group work and doing all of this. So that interruption and having to constantly doing it needs to be monotropic things.
We're just coming into it. Well, we're in our final minute now, so we'll just share some strategies and practical tips for supporting children who are neurodivergent. We understand if anyone has to leave, but hopefully you'll be able to catch up on the recording afterwards.
Thank you, Emma.
Yes, so I think if you guys have any strategies that you might think could work, you can put it down on the checkbooks, because we don't have any time to go through that together. But other than that, we think that there are a few different kind of strategies or suggestions that you guys might try to use in order to help prevent the experiences from being upsetting, which includes being around kind people, being around neurodivergent peers, staff understanding and also accommodating needs, giving them the personal space, try to give them a predictable environment, and also exercise different self-care strategies. And other than that, we will help to try to help the children and young people to feel valued and also validated, to create a friendly and also calm learning environment, to have neurodivergent staff and also authority figures so that you guys can share about your experience, as well as maybe connect with one another to help them to feel safe and to help them to feel connected with others, including other neurodivergent peers, and be acceptance and also loyalty in peer groups. And lastly, having an engaging learning environment. These all kind of strategies are based on the spell framework we just talked about. So if you guys have any kind of ideas, feel free to chip in or feel free to suggest in the chat box just to let everyone knows about that as well. And essentially, the core idea of all these kind of strategy have three different things. The first of all is validation. It is really, really important for us to validate their experience. And the second thing is co-regulation. It is about us and them, not just them or not just us. So we have to try to think about it in a more collaborative and more systematic way to try to really facilitate and to support them to connect with each other. And the final thing is working with family and friends. Same as the thing that we have to collaborate and working within a system. It is really important for us just to believe what families are talking about, because they often might experience different things compared to your experience at school. So it will be really important for us to try to understand each other's perspective and not dismissing them. So these are the three core ideas that we want to bring out from the section. So right now, I'm aware of time.
Can I just ask a question though?
Sure.
Can I? Because
Yeah,
I think I really enjoyed what you presented, and I think that, you know, the theories behind masking and identity management, it's really important for school staff. Obviously, schools are really complex places, so when we're looking at your spell strategy, you know, we can do as much as we can around structure and predictability, but also when you've got 30 children in a class
Absolutely.
and a school of 1,000, they are unpredictable places. So there are strategies. So for me, there were questions, you know, is it a case of medical or social model, or actually is there something that fits in between, where it's, you know, children come with their diagnosis and some of their behaviours, and then there's also structure, and it's where those two meet that you have to kind of play in those grey areas rather than it being one or the other. But also my concern, and what I thought this there's a lot of talk around children masking, but from a safeguarding perspective as school leaders, I agree that you need to work with parents. We also need to remember to have professional curiosity to challenge, because a couple of cases we've got concerns, well, in one case in particular, I won't go into detail, that actually it's the parents that's almost wanting the child to have more diagnosis than they actually have, and not just around their autism and masking, but there's always a series of lots and lots of things. So when does it become a concern that professionals need to meet and discuss? And we also had another autistic child whose behaviour, while they were dysregulated, and we could have kind of said they were masking and, you know, this is the release and overstress, actually were, because they were less verbal, there were, you know, we needed to explore that further, because it transpires there were quite considerable things going on at home that needed other agencies' involvement. So whilst I agree with everything you've said, is that we also need to remember that professional curiosity that sometimes children's behaviours, if we think about a traditional safeguarding approaches, you know, when a child's behaviour changes or you see some of these big behaviours, then they might be trying to communicate something else as well, and we need to. So it's a tricky path to navigate, isn't it? It's quite a complex path to navigate, is what I wanted to say.
No, absolutely. It does. It is something to be like having that curiosity. And eventually, I think it's really because it tends to be focused quite a lot on diagnosis. Therefore, if you have a diagnosis, then you are allowed to have accommodations, or to have some your adaptations or understanding. And a lot of the times thinking about how do we move away from that diagnosis is really thinking individually with the child, like what is it that you need, what is it that have I thought about dyslexia, dyspraxia, have I thought about your sensory differences, your have and just really kind of building that relationship with the child when they feel safe to really open up and to actually, and many times they'll say, I don't know, or they will say, oh no, I'm fine. And thinking about alexithymia as well, thinking about, so how do we build that relationship and connection with the child so that we can understand and not get into this battles, because we do see quite a lot of parents coming to say, well, school is not doing anything. So if you write a letter, then they'll listen to you. And I'm like, why am I here? This is like, I feel like I'm a referee between schools and families, and it can be quite tricky. So I think it's really thinking, yes, we do need to think about the family situation and thinking about the parents might also, if the kid is neurodivergent, that parents are neurodivergent, and we tend to forget that. We start thinking that it's like an uncle or a great grandparent who was autistic, and now so it's not really that. Are parents also struggling in really not feeling safe and masking with you? So is that constantly, also, and then you have the child in the middle. So it can be quite tricky. And in regards to your first question, that schools are very complex, and it's really validating that. I think that can be, and those quotes from previous, it was about young people talking about their experience. What is it that helps them in school? And a lot of the times, mainly, they just feel isolated. They feel like it's surprising to them when I say, you're only one autistic person. My next person is autistic, and the person after that is autistic or ADHD. So then it's like, really, there are other people like me. So it's just, how do we connect them with other neurodivergent people who understand each other's experiences? And not that because you're autistic, let's put everybody in an autistic box, but it's more about how do we find them in the community? How do we see them as a community? And really empathetic as adults in power, because we're the ones in power, and acknowledging that we have the power to say and when to give accommodations, when to actually do adaptations. We own that power. We are the ones who say, yes, you're allowed to, or no, you're not allowed to. So children do not have much autonomy about when they can walk away because they feel too much. So just really, I think having that adult that is safe, we love to think we're safe, but are we really safe? And it's kind of reflecting and really say, I know I have asked you to do 10,000 things in the last 20 minutes. What can I do? Would it be breaking it down better? Did you understand everything? And yes, when you have 30 children in a classroom, how do you adapt to every 30 children? So I tend to say that a lot of the times I teach at UCL, and I actually treat everyone as neurodivergent. This is my suggestion, and this is what works for me. So you guys obviously need to do that. But I treat like that 30-minute, I give the adults every 30 minutes, 1 minute break. A sensory break, I call it. In the classroom, the lights are lower. We put a lot of pictures, interactions in it. We just let them think about it, maybe come back later to talk about it. Let me tell you, when we skip the 1 minute break every 30 minutes, I hear about it. I hear it in the feedback. Where is the 30-minute? And these are adults complaining. And I'm just wondering how children feel in that. I mean, when they don't have that autonomy. When you're an adult, you need the toilet, you get up and go. You don't need a red car or a pass to go to the toilet. So really being empathetic that, you know, I see you and I get you, I think it's validating for children. And I hope, it's a long answer, but I hope that was helpful. Sorry, I went way over time here. So
that was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. So I think there is a checkout exercise
Thank
to see
you.
what we've kind of developed through the session. But thank you so much to our colleagues in CAMHS. The recording will be available, and you're of course welcome to reach out to any of us if you have any further questions or learning needs or support that we can offer to your schools. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.